It's my pleasure to introduce our final keynote speaker. And if you're sitting comfortably, I want you to imagine that it's 11:26 at night on the 17th of August, 2009. And a man called Freeman Ding, a new student at the Haas School, UC Berkeley, is writing in his blog, somewhat breathlessly, "Dean Lyons gave a great speech on leadership today." And a great speech on leadership is what you're about to get, plus the opportunity to ask questions. But this is no ordinary approach to leadership, and it's being delivered to you by no ordinary dean. Ladies and gentlemen, prepare to listen to a pathbender. Don't get me wrong, Rich Lyons has the experience and qualifications which many a dean must envy. First, as a scholar and a teacher. He has a PhD from MIT, a distinguished career as a professor, beginning at Columbia Business School, then UC Berkeley, where he won the university's highest teaching honor, the Distinguished Teaching Award. He's also been teaching at locations across the globe, Toulouse, Marseille, London, Stockholm, Tokyo. He's been an advisor. He sits on the Council for Foreign Relations, has advised multiple organizations, including the Federal Reserve Bank and the United Nations. And finally, as a businessman, Rich has served as a director on the boards of 3 companies and chaired one. And before rejoining UC Berkeley as Dean of the Haas School of Business in 2008, Rich was Chief Learning Officer at Goldman Sachs in New York, responsible for leadership development for the firm's managing directors, where he worked on leadership and how it's linked to business growth. He also has some characteristics that few other deans have. I think this will be true. He's a musician. He has several musical copyrights. And he's reputed to be the only male dean who wears an earring. But above all, Rich is a pathbender. For Rich, we live in an era of unsustainability. It's no longer possible to assume, as our parents did, that the environment, the economy, healthcare, education can continue to develop as they've done before in a straight line. If they do so, we will simply hit the wall. Nor is it safe to assume that society will forget the role that business schools have played in educating today's leaders. For Rich, business schools have a major challenge: how to respond intelligently to the fact that we are an integral part of the system that performed so poorly over the last 3 years. So a new approach to leadership is needed, one that has the imagination and the skills to bend those straight line paths. For Rich, it's not the knowledge economy which will secure the future, but the ideas economy. And all that requires leadership through innovation. And he's been living that over the last 18 months, as Rich has driven a re-evaluation of the mission of the Haas School, a revamp of the MBA curriculum, and a new articulation of the school's culture. The new curriculum starts this autumn, but that's not enough for Rich. The man with the earring is already thinking about how collectively business schools can continue to attract and develop the best talent, the people who will move all of us from the straight and narrow to the innovative path needed for a successful future. It's my pleasure to introduce Dean Rich Lyons.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that, Julia. I also appreciate that all of you are here. We are competing against Ghana and the US at 11:30. I asked to have the game put up on the screen to my left at 11:30. I can't promise that that will happen. Let me start from the future and work backward. My kids are 10 and 7. I believe we think about our kids' futures differently than our parents thought about ours. And this changed in just one generation. When I was young, growing up, the big themes of the day, the meta themes, were things like, look, the world just did not agree that markets were the right way to organize economies. We lived in what people called a bipolar world, relatively stable, anxious. We also had significant restraints on trade in goods and services and capital. Today, when I look at my kids and I think about their future, what comes to mind are unsustainabilities. These are commercial paths that we're on, where a straight line continuation is not going to work. The straight line will hit a wall in my kids' lifetime, if not our own. There are many examples of this: healthcare expenditure, energy use, access to clean water around the world, access to education, carbon, the economics of aging. Look, the list goes on and on. Healthcare expenditure is forecast to reach 50% of GDP by 2080. Something very substantial has to happen between now and 2080. Both sides of the political aisle agree on this. Put differently, the straight line paths are going to need bending. That bending is going to be done largely by business. We're going to need the right people in business to do that bending. And I'm, of course, not just talking about CEOs. I'm talking about people at all levels, in all kinds of organizations. I view these unsustainabilities as a tremendous opportunity for us as business schools. Look, the issue is this. The question is, does society have the right human capital in place? We are in the human capital business. That's what we do. We will be drawn into the center of this conversation eventually, whether we like it or not. I believe that if we act now, we have an opportunity to lead it. It's like the difference, in my mind, the difference between two words: adapting and innovating. Adaptive systems, like natural selection, respond to external changes, but they do not anticipate them. Innovating is about anticipation. We can see this coming. So let me talk about what we can do, because this is about what we can do, not just what we can talk about. I think fundamental changes are going to need to occur in curriculum. I think they'll need to occur in admissions. They'll need to occur in the norms and values that define the cultures of our programs. Before I get into those three areas, though, I want to talk about smart money. Smart money. Why? I'm a finance guy. You'll have to pardon me. One way that I like to put ideas to the test is to ask, where's the smart money going? Where's the smart money going? Is the market sending signals that these are enormous commercial opportunities? Yes. Is the market sending signals that these are the big challenges society faces in the 21st century? Yes. Is the market sending signals that the wedge between doing well and doing good has never been smaller? Yes. Let me start with three exemplars. These are people that I view as pathbenders. I'm going to start first with Vinod Khosla. Pathbender, in my judgment, smart money, in my judgment. You may know Vinod Khosla. He is a renowned venture capitalist, co-founder of Sun Microsystems. He has his own Khosla Ventures. He just launched a fund, brand new fund, raised over $1 billion very, very quickly. To do what? In his words, to reinvent the infrastructure of society. Vinod Khosla is investing other people's money. That's important. Why? Because he has a tremendous fiduciary responsibility to get the economics right. He cannot go off on a whim, however good intentioned. The economics have to be right. What is he specifically doing? What are they investing in? They're investing in clean technology. They're investing in energy efficiency. They're investing in carbon capture and reduction. Vinod Khosla is a pathbender in my judgment. He is smart money. A second exemplar for me is GE's Jeff Immelt. He is, in my judgment, a pathbender, smart money. We know that he is investing other people's money. He has an enormous fiduciary responsibility to get the economics right. There are big commercial opportunities here. We've all heard what GE is up to, right? We've all heard of healthy imagination. We've all heard of eco-imagination. So in his words, right, we are going to stake GE's claim around the big issues of the 21st century. That is what he's talking about. What is healthy imagination about? Healthy imagination is about global, sustainable health. It's about early health, getting at health care and health expense and health further upstream where the behavior happens. It's also about radical affordability of instrumentation in the healthcare industry. He is making massive investments in this area. Eco-imagination. Look, the eco-imagination portfolio of businesses at GE last year, 2009, brought in over $20 billion. These are enormous commercial opportunities. That's an enormous firm. He is a pathbender in my view. Here's a third exemplar, Steve Bird at Safeway. Retail industry. How do we think about the consumer side? I view him as a pathbender. I view him as smart money. Have you heard of Safeway's Healthy Measures program? Safeway's Healthy Measures program is essentially a way to help their employees save up to $800 per year on their health care premiums and also save Safeway some money at the same time. What is the driving insight of Healthy Measures? The driving insight is to understand that 70%, some 70% of health care expenditure and cost is based on behavior that people themselves control. And you need to work at the behavior level. So what are we talking about here? Look, we overeat. We under-recreate. We have that third drink when we don't need it. Judging from last night, some of you understand what I'm talking about. This has been so successful at Safeway that they have started something called Safeway Health. You know what Safeway Health is? It's an advisory firm. It is a firm within Safeway that provides advice to other firms who want to introduce programs like this. And Safeway Health gets paid for that advice. Here's another indicator of the success. You've heard of the Safeway Amendment, perhaps? This is new legislation that gives firms more room to get this right, to change the behavior of their employees, to make their lives healthier, to save employees money and costs, to save the firm money and costs. It's not just enough, do you or don't you have insurance? Let's start working at the behavior level. So there were three exemplars that I just mentioned, all of them smart money. I think there are two noteworthy elements in what I just said that I want to pull out. Number one, this is not the fringe. This is the mainstream. And of course, there are a lot of people in those organizations supporting those CEOs that are pathbenders themselves. They deserve a lot of the credit. I don't mean to suggest that those three people did all this work. There's a lot of pathbending leadership in those firms. Here's noteworthy element number two. Nobody is suppressing the price system here. Nobody is suppressing the market mechanism. I'm an economist. Firms are responding to market signals, but please understand that in times of stress, the deep parameters of the system matter. You could say it doesn't really matter what we do because prices will send the right signals and the system will adjust. One of the deep parameters in our system that will determine how effectively we adjust and respond as a society to stress is leadership capacity, and in particular, in my view, path-bending leadership capacity. You cannot simply say, oh, we need more of it. Flip the switch. In a day or a week or a month or a quarter, we will have what we need. Leadership capacity is a parameter of the system that's built up over years, decades, really. We need to build up that capacity. We are going to need more path-bending leadership capacity in the system when things get stressful. They're going to get stressful in the next 30, 40 years. Okay, back to where I was before. What can we actually do tomorrow, Monday, whatever day? What can we do? I want to talk first about curriculum. Curriculum is the essence of what we do. When we think about what we deliver into this marketplace, into the people that come to our schools. Here's a question. Look, Rich, get concrete for me, please. Will you get concrete? I'm an HR person, you might say. Show me the competency model. I need to communicate it to the recruiters. Show me the capabilities. Let's talk turkey here. Well, guess what? One of the elements of the competency model of the pathbending leader, pathbending leaders need to know accounting. Pathbending leaders need to know finance. Pathbending leaders need to know marketing. They need to know strategy. Those things will not go away. What else do they need to know? What can we lean into? That's really an important element here. I'm going to offer 2 concrete curriculum changes, 2 things we can do, 2 things we can change now. These 2 things come from a list of some 10 capabilities that domain experts have convinced me are important for getting this done and that we as business schools can deliver. We have the expertise to deliver. So these are 2 of 10. I don't want to go through all 10. If you would like all 10, give me your card after the talk. I will send them to you. Send me an email, however you'd like to get them. I'm happy to create an open system approach and give you some sense for what we're thinking about. Of course, it's true that the 10 things that are in my head are probably not the right 10 things for your school. That's not my suggestion, that the general theory is here. It's worked out. But we can put this together. We can put it together as business schools. And I want to open our hand to you if it's useful. Okay, curriculum idea number 1. Experimentation. Experimentation. Let me start this with a story. Google. I went to a talk by 4 or 5, it was a panel, senior Google executives. John Hanke was one of them. He's the founder of Google Earth. If I had to summarize that talk in one sentence, in one question, this is the question. What would your business look like if the cost of running experiments went to 0? That's what they were talking about. Imagine if you had an idea within your organization, a new idea about how to do CRM, client relationship management, on how to do distribution, on how to do brand management, a new revenue model, area after area, and you could run an experiment and get feedback almost costlessly, almost immediately. Imagine how fast your business would evolve. So at Google, I'm listening to them talk about this, and they're saying, look, 2 people will have lunch together. An idea will come up. They'll stay up 2 nights. They'll write some code. They'll put a beta version up on the website. They will instrument that beta very intensively so that they're learning maximally from the test. They will put it up to customers in a selective way for a week. They'll take it down. They'll read the data. They will either kill it, which is typically what happens, or they will iterate, perhaps many times. And ultimately, that's the menu of services you and I see when we go to Google. How many of you, I'm sure many of you, I won't ask the question, the industry mantra, think big, experiment small. Experimentation is winning out over planning. Competitive dynamics in industry after industry are resetting at such a pace that putting a plan, a strategy in place and just executing on it for the next 10 years, there just aren't many places in the world economy where that makes any sense anymore. We will always need planning, don't get me wrong, but experimentation is a deep skill these days. One last comment on experimentation. So this is one of the curriculum ideas we can do. Experimentation is a lot of fun because our faculty get it. Our faculty totally get this. If you go to a faculty member and you say, hey, we want to start delivering to the MBAs or the undergrads or at whatever level, we want to start delivering more experimental design skills, they will love it. Go ahead, try it. Go ahead. Tell them that experimentation is a way for them to frame what they've already been teaching in microeconomics, demand uncertainty, or in marketing, market research, or in finance, real options. Experimentation. They will love it. Go ahead, ask them if we could teach a statistics course to the MBAs, data and decisions, whatever you call it. A statistics course that doesn't start with the question, here's a sample. Is it biased? Is it valid? Is it representative? But instead starts with the question, here's a decision I need to make. What data would I like to have to make it? And what experiment do I need to run in order to get those data? Your faculty will love it. I'm not kidding. This is a true story. On that last point about what data do I need to make the decision and how am I going to run an experiment to get it, I mentioned that to one of my own faculty. Some of you may know him. His name is Ernesto Dalbo. I mentioned that idea to Ernesto. He shot back. He said, Rich, a Copernican revolution. It is? He said, this transforms our students from data consumers to data producers. That's a great insight. You've got to love that. Bottom line, experimentation is a set of skills, identifiable. We can do a better job delivering them. Here's a second curriculum idea, and then I'll move on. Problem framing. Problem framing. We will always need problem solvers. Value is migrating in organizations these days upstream to the problem finders and the problem framers. Isn't it curious that the first conversation our faculty have with their PhD students is a conversation they never have, almost never, with their MBA students? That first PhD conversation sounds like this. It's not really about answering the question that's been posed. It's about knowing what question to pose in the first place. Every PhD hears that when they arrive. We don't say it to our MBAs. Problem framing has been right at the center of the academic frontier, the academic knowledge frontier, forever. Increasingly, it's at the center of the commercial frontier. A great reframer, Jack Welch, used to say to these division heads, the heads of the businesses at GE, don't come in here and tell me that you have a 60% market share. Expand the definition of your market so that you have a 10% share, and then tell me how you're going to get to 30. That is great reframing, great problem reframing. So when we think about reframing skills, what comes to mind for me is a conversation, in my judgment, an extremely productive conversation we as business schools have been having over the last 5 years, at least. What is that conversation? That conversation is about integrative thinking. It is about critical thinking. It is about systems thinking. It is about design thinking. The point is not about a horse race. It's not that you do one or the other and this one's winning and that one's winning. In my judgment, wrong way to think about it. What is it about? It's about what our faculty call, I'll use the jargon, metacognition. Metacognition is thinking about thinking. Metacognition is being able to say, hey, why don't we throw a systems approach at this problem? And doing it systematically and deliberately. Hey, why don't we throw a design thinking approach at this problem? These different thinking approaches are about seeing different subsets of solutions. When you apply a systems approach, a different set of solutions will be evident. When you apply a design thinking approach, again, a different set of solutions. The power is in being intentional about using one approach versus the other and having facility for all of them. The power is in the framing, or maybe more appropriately, more precisely, the power is in the reframing, the ability to reframe deliberately. Let me give you a practical problem framing example. Shai Agassi, here's somebody that you may have heard of. Better World company. What was the issue he was confronting? We look at a world that's moving increasingly toward electric transportation, electric vehicles. Everybody framed the problem this way. How do we charge this faster? How do we charge this battery faster? How do we find a battery that will hold the charge longer? Agassi said, there's a missing piece of infrastructure here. He went out a level in his thinking. He said, why can't we have filling stations where you drive your electric vehicle up and you hand them your battery and they hand you a charged battery? Wow, that's different. You better believe it's different. But that would rely on an infrastructure we don't have. You got that right. That's why nobody was thinking about it. But it's an infrastructure that can exist. And that's what he's building, working to build with Better World. Look, that's a profoundly successful way to reframe a problem. And it might very well, we don't know yet, be successful. But it is clear how insightful that was. And it took thinking at the infrastructure or system level to realize, wait, there are design parameters we haven't been thinking about. Bottom line, curriculum. Two very identifiable skills, very tightly linked to path-bending leadership. Experimentation, problem framing. We can deliver them. We can act on them right now. I want to talk about admissions now. These are the things we can do. Curriculum, admissions. I think we're missing a big opportunity in admissions. I'll bet all of you, everybody in this room, had a few applicants to your program that you really loved, that didn't get in, that might have got in if the guiding vision had been path-bending leadership. I want to say a few words about what I'll call no stumbles. No stumbles. I think the elephant in the room is admissions. And one way to think about that is no stumbles. Here's what I mean by that. There's still a lot of demand for our degrees. At the MBA level, there is still a lot of demand. We have the opportunity, in most cases, to be somewhat selective. In some cases, we get so selective that you can't have stumbled if you want to get in. Oh, a couple of bad grades as an undergrad. There's a gap in the work experience there. Your GMAC was not off the charts. And I've got a lot of people in the queue that are up in front of you, right? Part of the problem here, and you're all well aware of it, you're experts in the field, much more so than I am. Part of the problem here, of course, is that the people who have stumbled, at least some set of the people who have stumbled, I would never suggest just let the stumblers in. Okay, here's a subset. What did they do? They got out of their comfort zone. They took big professional risks. When do we develop the most? It's when we go through those career transitions that really do take us out of our comfort zone. And guess what? It's a risk because it's a risk. It's a risk because it may not go well. Somebody who walks through every box and gets to the point where it's like, wow, not a nick in the whole program. Are these the people that you would bet on as pathbenders? Are these the people that we're admitting? I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, Rich, that's awfully easy for you to stand up there and say. And this is really hard. I agree. I get that. Let me frame it a little differently. We're not talking about our industry now. Some other industry. You hear somebody say this: I like that. I think that is the right direction. But I can't go there. We can't go there because of so many short-run pressures. End quote. You know, there are a lot of people in society that think that thinking is exactly the problem. You may be among them. Now, come back to our industry. What would all of us at some level think? Our GMACs will fall. Our GPA will fall. The clarity of our message to recruiters will dissipate. Our rankings will fall. Is that where we are, if we're honest with ourselves? Is that where we want to be? Okay, let me give you two concrete things we can do right away in admissions. Here's number one. Put together a Pathbender list. 10, 20, whatever number of people is appropriate for your program. The Pathbender list is a set of applicants that when you read, you think, this thing lines up with the way I understand pathbending. Your school needs to define pathbending for itself. I can't stand up here and talk about here's the right definition. That would be ridiculous. But if you kept a Pathbender list, those conversations would have to happen. You'd have to say, who goes on it? Why do they go on it? Why do we want it? Why is this a big picture mission that we should be going after? What does it all add up to? And guess what? Not all the people on that list should get in. That's not the suggestion. The question is there a purposeful way to think about a list that defines a future and takes a stand on it? That's something each of us could do in our programs right away. Here's another concrete thing you, we, all of us could do right away. Ask your program director or your relevant dean for a meeting. Say you want to pitch a vision of where the future might be going and how the school might want to think about it. And suppose you walked into that pitch and you said, there's real curriculum out there that we can do more about. We can lean our admissions in this direction. Not totally distort it, but we could lean into it sensibly, productively. And we can build cultures, norms, and values that support this kind of leader that we think the future needs. Even if your program director or dean, she or he, is not compelled by what you said, let me tell you something. They will appreciate your initiative. They will appreciate your willingness to look around corners, to do your best to look around corners, to be intentional, to be purposeful. You can't lose if you do that. So those were two admissions ideas. Let me turn to culture. What can we do around culture? By culture, as I said before, I'm talking about the norms and values that guide behavior of our students while they're at our school. I'm talking about the norms and values that influence how we make admissions decisions. I'm talking about norms and values that affect how our faculty and staff behave. And I'm talking about norms and values that will guide the behavior of our alumni long after they leave, because they wear our uniform. And if they slip up, our reputations are at risk. Let me do a thought experiment. Suppose we did a thought experiment that looked like this. We're going to pass out a bunch of sheets of paper. You write down the 5 firms on your sheet of paper that you respect most, your criteria, your definition, whatever it is. We'll collect the sheets of paper. We'll find the 5, 6, 10 firms that show up most often. When you do that exercise, you find that the firms that show up most often are strong culture firms. They are firms where the secret sauce, the essence, the reason that the people in those firms just behave a little bit differently, it's not because they have a monopolistic access to the best talent. Culture is really defining of those firms. And believe me, most of you know this better than I do, those firms are very deliberate about their cultures. they use every lever to manage their cultures. There's a big set of levers around people selection. You do interviews differently, right? Applications look differently. Recommendations have different questions on them. An information session will look different. Whole set of selection methods, and every one of them is designed to deliver the norms and values that make that firm tick. There's a big bucket of levers on culture that firms use around what I'll call orientation or onboarding. What does the first hour feel like when they arrive? The first day, the first week, the first month? In the first hour, did they hear about the defining norms and values, or didn't they? And of course, part of orientation starts happening before they've even arrived. Did you talk about norms and values at the information session? Firms are profoundly intentional about this. The strong culture firms. Every firm, every organization, every business school has a culture, right? Every firm, organization has a culture. The question is, are they on the profoundly deliberate end of the spectrum, or are they on the de facto culture end of the spectrum? The third big bucket of levers that firms use is the ongoing experiences. Tone from the top, leadership development, training, peer-to-peer enforcement of the norms and values. Hugely important for getting this to work. Setting a standard that you call your colleagues' peers out if they are violating the norms of the group, of the firm. So now I'm going to be a little more provocative. Still on culture. I don't believe, personally, that any business school has been as intentional about its culture as the strong culture firms are about theirs. Please understand, I said it before, I'll say it again. We all have cultures. We all have cultures. They're different. I'm talking about not the content of the culture, right? But how it's strengthened and managed. Really important. So, I think we could do a lot to make our cultures more purposeful. Not just strengthening cultures, but saying, here, this is a definition of the future. We want a set of norms and values that support it. The norms and values at your school will be different and should be different than the norms and values at my school. This is not about making everything uniform. It's about finding the heartbeat. It's about finding the heartbeat of your school so that people can rally around it. A heartbeat that has meaning and really living by it. And also a heartbeat reflected in culture that supports a view of the future. In my judgment, path-bending leadership capacity is an absolutely fundamental element of that. You may use different words. You may not want to use that concept. But we have a lot of room to do something around culture. Because, in my judgment, as I said, we're way behind the top firms on this. Let me move toward a conclusion. Path-bending leaders come from any school. They come from anywhere. They are not just CEOs. Business is going to be where most of the work of path-bending comes from. Business responding to good old-fashioned market signals. But we, as business schools, we will have increased the system's capacity to respond to those signals. We will have put a different and better human capital in place. We'll have selected the right people. We will have put a different curriculum in place. We will have set norms and values that make this work, that support this. Suppose I said it differently. Suppose I said, your life depends on it. Really depends on it. If you don't do enough over the next 10 years to produce more path-bending leaders, you will not have access to health care. You will not have access to safe water. You will not have ready access to energy. And you will not have access to retirement savings. Would you do anything differently? Would you work on your curriculum a little differently? Start thinking about culture, admissions differently? When I answer those questions honestly myself, my answer is yes, I sure would. That for me is a measure of the opportunity we're facing. It's a measure of the opportunity we're facing. Of course, we do not have a gun to our heads, not literally. Still, I believe this is an imperative for us. I believe it is what we must do. We, the people in this room and the institutions that we represent, we are in the position to push this forward, to make this better. A fundamental position in what human capital society will have in the future. How compelling would it be if we as management educators defined a future, took a stand based on it? I started by saying my kids are 10 and 7. They're going to be around in 2050. The graduates that we are producing today are going to be retiring about 2050. A lot of things have to happen between now and 2050. We can play a big role in making them happen. This is a really exciting time to be at a business school. Thanks very much.
And Rich has very kindly said, very graciously said, that he will take questions, as I told you earlier. So if you have questions, please come up to the microphones. But I'm going to just abuse my position because I can't resist. I'm going to put the first one in. Rich, you talked about norms and values. Where do you stand on the MBA oath?
That's all the time we have. Thanks very much for coming. For me, a question like that has to start at one place. It starts at behavior. What we're trying to do is change behavior. When you're trying to support behavior change, my own view is you need a lot of tools, and you should use a lot of tools. The MBA oath, in my judgment, has generated a lot of tremendous conversations that we're having. I see it as very productive for that reason. If the question is, what would you think about if you had to introduce the MBA oath and perhaps make it mandatory at Berkeley? Here's one thing I would think about. When I talked about norms and values earlier, for me, norms and values need to be a distillation of the essence for people. It needs to be where the meaning is. It needs to be something that everybody gets, agrees on, feels proud of, acts aligned with. Can something like the MBA oath play that role? Something that, for a lot of our schools, will have been created elsewhere. I don't think it detracts from anything directly. The only thing I really worry about is if you wanted to take a stand on a set of norms and values that are your heartbeat and drive your organization's lifeblood with it, it's hard to do that if you have the MBA oath at the same time, because people don't quite know what to pay attention to.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Anybody else got questions? If so, come up to the mics, and if not, I've got a follow-up one. Yay. I'll hold my follow-up. Go.
I'll take a stab. I'm Dylan. I work at UCLA down the road in the UC system. So firstly, just thanks for your kind of respect of the audience, because it was obviously a well-prepared communication. So thank you for that. I have a 3-year-old, and I appreciated you leading with that. And I think a lot about what is the world that our graduates are going to give to him. When you talk about it comes to changing behavior, I have this, we have such, at California school, we have such a diverse student body, 35 countries of birth in an average entering class. Connected to that is, a whole array of religious, spiritual heritage that those students bring. I'm wondering if if you talk about path bending, we are talking about sustainable behaviors for an entire 6.5 billion person planet. You know, is there a place where we can responsibly and respectfully have a conversation about what are those deep, you use the word deep, orienters that people come from? You know, Christian, Jewish, Muslim, you know, Africa, you know, there's a big world out there.
Yeah.
And I wonder,
Yeah.
you know, is there a way, because we have this kind of political correct limit,
Yeah.
you know, religion's outside the conversation, you know, is there a way that business schools can responsibly have those worlds inform each other
Yeah.
as we evolve and have, so
That's a super, look, it's a super question. It's obviously a very, very big question. You all know that I don't have all the answers, right? You hopefully took that from this presentation. Still, I think, you know, we are in a position where society wants us to take a stand. When I talk about path-bending leaders, do I now think at Berkeley, for example, that every single person we let in and want to produce needs to be a path-bending leader? No, it's going too far, right? The question is, are we going to do more of that? Are we going to put more of that human capital in place than we otherwise would have? Because the system really needs it. The only other thing that I would offer is that's such a great question. Look, GMAC could play a facilitation role, a clearinghouse role. We need to put our minds together. We need to put our institutions together. We need to make sure that this is obviously reflecting cultures around the world, perspectives around the world, religions around the world. Look, this is a big, big problem. But because it's big, doesn't mean that we can't be intentional around it. So I take the question for exactly what it was meant. Look, there are a lot of challenges here. But let's take a stand is really at the end. And let's do it together. I think if we do it together, we're going to be a lot better off than if we try and do it separately.
Aha, great. Another one down here. I'm just warning you, Rich, I do have another one.
Okay.
Hi there. My name's Allison. I'm from NYU. Thanks so much for your remarks.
Thanks.
Really excited to go back and talk with my colleagues about a lot of your ideas. So I guess I'm wondering, as admissions officers or program directors, we can affect a lot of change, but I think a lot of that is a partnership between administrators and faculty.
Yes.
To really affect change within your institution or to really deepen your culture. So I'm wondering if you have some best practices that you can share from your time at Berkeley about creating those bridges between administrators and faculty.
Thank you for that. You know, the faculty question is just one we have to get to, right? It's, I had a line in my talk earlier where I didn't say it, but remember when I said, go ahead, your faculty will love you. At one point I was going to say, they might even hug you. I took that out because they probably won't, and I don't get that many hugs from my faculty. Look, at the end of the day, you know, they view themselves, the sort of tenure track faculty members, as the equity holders, right? The sort of deep equity holders. First of all, one thing that has changed, I know this isn't a complete answer to your question, but one thing to keep in mind is, you know, a lot of our faculty members today are professional faculty members. They're adjunct professors, right? Those folks really are, on average, much more amenable to sort of listening to this. They come from the private sector. They get this. They want alignment. They want the story, right? They want to be ambassadors. With the full-time faculty, okay, so here's the essential bit, right? I'll be straight with you. So look, whatever the culture and norms and values for your school needs to be to produce leaders of this kind, right? You've got to determine that yourself. It may be a cultural statement. This is not one of the ones we have at Berkeley as a core value, but something like, there's got to be a better way to do this. Suppose you wrote that down at your school and you said, here's a core value. Now, at the end of the day, of course, you're going to have to bring it to the faculty, and you're going to have to get their buy-in. So I'll just lay bare. Here's what I told the faculty when we went through this exercise. I said, level 1, this matters to our students. It matters to our alumni. We consulted with you up, down, and sideways because we tried to codify stuff that was always here. I do not want to hear you undermining this in the classroom or with the students, okay? So level 1 is no undermining. This matters. Even if for you, there weren't that many in this category, it doesn't matter that much if it feels too corporate, because some of them will say that, right? Here's level 2, though. I need your engagement. If we're really going to do this, I need your engagement. So here's what I said to them. I don't want to go into our core values. That's not what this session is about. But what I did say to the faculty is, look at those core values that we wrote down. We call them defining principles. Are you proud of students that look like that? Are those the students, the graduates you want to help me produce? Then let's produce that together. Now, the highest level that in most organizations, corporations, you would say is like, am I going to write down, we have one that we call confidence without attitude. Am I going to write a review of one of my faculty to the provost and say, oh, he or she, no, too much attitude? That's going to be hard for me to pull off. So the faculty is the one subset where we got their fingerprints all over it. We told them, don't do this. And they were okay with that. And we told them, look, if you're proud of this as our output, let's do this. Let's dial it into the classroom experience, et cetera. So, look, I'm not saying we won the battle, but that was the one segment of our world where we had to think in a multi-layered way and deliver it in a pretty subtle way. And at the end of the day, they seemed to be on board.
Anyone else? Okay, well then I'm going to just sneak in just the very last one.
Good.
You threw GMAC a challenge if we could act as a clearinghouse. But what could your school do? What could you do to get these ideas out?
Perfectly fair, perfectly fair. So one thing that I'll remind people, these 10 capabilities that are part of this competency model, at least as I see it, the domain experts have been convincing me of. I'm happy to show anybody that would like that list. If you've got a card after the talk or an email, please. We're happy to share some of the changes in our curriculum. So we've made a number of changes in our core courses. 3 of our 12 core courses are totally different now, and they load on these capabilities, these 10 capabilities, in ways that they didn't used to. Happy to give you some insights on what we've done there. I would be happy to play a role with GMAC or with whomever else. Look, this has got to be a consolidated kind of open system effort, in my view, if we're going to really push this forward. And if I could play a role in, or anybody at Berkeley, in helping GMAC or others do this, I would be happy to. I guess the bottom line is I'd like to be available, and I'd like Berkeley-Haas to be available. If we can help do this in an open system cooperative way, I think we'd like to be helpful.
Thank you. Any final words?
Thanks, Julia. I guess, let me just say a few things to conclude. Do you remember in my concluding comments I said, what if your life really depended on it? What if it really depended on it? There are lives that are really going to depend on this around the world. They really are. They really are. And we are the group, we are the institutions we represent, this people in this room, we can move this. We are the right people to get after this. We are in the human capital business, putting the right human capital in place for society to be able to address this over the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years. That is what we do. There are immense short-run pressures. You would have pointed that out to me if I hadn't pointed it out myself, right? What about the rankings and the recruiters and the GPAs and all of it, right? But can we feel that it's okay, if you feel that's what we're doing, to do what we're doing, and then at the same time look over there, see people elsewhere in society and business and say, where's all that short-term thinking coming from? Why can't they do the right longer-term thing? I don't think we can afford to do that. Let's at least be consistent. Let's at least be consistent. I think we have a big opportunity here. I think it's really exciting. It's obviously a massive challenge. Happy to help in any way we can. Thanks very much. Thanks. Thanks. Thank you.